All right. Hi, everybody. This is Dan Hegerich. This is Do the Cure podcast. I am your host today, and I do have a awesome guest today, Dr. Don Clum, C-L-U-M. I know you want to say K-L-U-M, but it's C-L-U-M. Dr. Don Clum is a prolific, literally prolific provider of content on basically the topic of insulin resistance and everything that surrounds insulin resistance. His website is insulinfriendlyliving.com. I'm going to probably say that a few times so you could remember it, write it down a few times. And there's a lot more that will come. But Dr. Don Clum is a classic chiropractic with lots of family members that were chiropractors. So it's in his blood before he was even born to be a chiropractor and a healer in his own way. And that led him down a path to studying the psychology of health as well. And then it drove you into the physiology of health because you had a background in nutrition as a undergraduate degree in human nutrition. And then you do touch on energetics of health, and but your main focus is insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, anything that comes around that. And I think today we're going to focus on that today. But more importantly, I want to introduce Don and his prolific work. I want you to get out there and see his delivery style is absolutely playful. It's that's the best I could say. It's artistic, it's playful, but your compassion comes through in your directness. Like, you don't waste time or people's time. You value people's time, you value your time. And so your directness is the way you're offering people your love and compassion for a person's well-being. So I appreciate that immensely because I have a tendency to be wordy. I have a tendency to be storytelling in my particular healing, so methodology. So anyway, without further ado, Don, let's jump right in about the biochemistry of health and insulin and how it is so pervasive, not only as a problem, because we want to talk to the potential to reversing that too, right? Yeah. People always say, let's just talk to people's problem and validate their problem, and then they can trust us. I want to talk to people's soul, and I want to talk to their inspiration that you can reverse insulin resistance, number one. You can reverse type 2 diabetes, no problem, right? Yep. And and some people can really improve the quality of life with insulin type 1. And then let's talk. And type 3, right? The dementias and the brain decline that is resulting from this glucose and insulin and leptin and all these other hormones that play a role in these things. So Dawn, I want to give you the driver's seat and share with the listening members today everything you can about assessing insulin resistance, and then maybe a couple strategies that are really key.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for that intro. That sounded great. I should have you do more of those for me because I don't know if I can do that well myself. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, insulin has become the focus because as I went down different paths, all roads led to insulin, and whether I wanted to or not. And when I got into the physiology, because as you know, there's a lot of stuff that pops up, right? There's a new diet, there's a new approach, there's a new supplement, there's a new concept. And I didn't have a measuring stick to be able to say it makes sense or it doesn't make sense. And patients would come in and they'd be trying some new things. And so when I started breaking it down, it all comes back to the physiology. And hopefully we can communicate that, because if you can understand the basic core physiology of what's going on, then you have your own measuring stick to judge whether this new information is on target or not, right? Otherwise, people bounce around for everything.
That's a good thing, because then we won't get trapped into this for that situation where take this for that problem, because we don't have a place to come home to. What's the problem? What's the central problem? And does that help that problem? Exactly. Does it help resolve that? So you could get trapped, like I have, and many people, in the supplement things and the herb things, but then it doesn't really turn the needle or move the needle because the insulin factor wasn't really addressed in the way we live.
That's one of my biggest passions is when I found out that doing it the model you said, the treatment model, can alleviate treatments. It can alleviate symptoms. It can make you feel better. You can lose weight. You can see changes in numbers, but that doesn't necessarily mean you fixed anything. That is a big reality, because what ends up happening is people go down, they put a lot of effort in these things. They work hard, they follow the diet, they do the workouts, they listen, they do what they are told, and then they see a change, but they're still going down the same path and they don't know it. So what does that mean? That means that they're going towards diabetes, for example, but their blood sugar is better, or they've lost the weight, and they get blindsided. Because if you're not looking, it's like going to England and going across the road as an American. We're not used to it. And if we're looking the wrong way, we're going to get sideswiped, right?
Right.
I'm all for looking both ways, but I want to look at the way of impending doom first, right? I don't want to get hit. I remember one time I was there, literally, my dad grabbed me by my belt and pulled me back because I almost stepped right in front of a bus because looking the wrong way.
Looking to the right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You get sideswiped. So I think in our modern medical establishment, they've taken the acute model of save your life, which they're excellent at, and they've applied it to a chronic condition or all the chronic conditions. And that means that there's a disconnect and they're looking the wrong way. Just like if you take a chronic resolution, a chronic treatment, a chronic program to get better, and you apply it to an emergency situation, that can be just as fatal, right? If I get hit by a car, don't take me in to my chiropractor. Take me to the hospital, get me patched up, and I'll get there. Right? Different models, different reasons, but when you apply one to the other, it can be disastrous. And that's what we see here. We apply the treatment model to a chronic condition. We see changes, but it just gives a false confidence. And then later down the road, we get slammed by that bus and we have, boom, where did the diabetes come from?
Yeah. Wow. I've been doing everything and I've been feeling great. And now I got cancer. How did I get cancer? I've been in my best shape ever. Have you heard
he was
that
fine
before?
Yesterday.
How many times have you heard that?
Hundreds. Yeah, he was fine yesterday. I don't know. He was running.
I was living the best life.
And died.
Yeah. Right. And so these are the things that you're saying are festering underneath what might be that acute, and I call that an acute, correct me if I'm wrong and add to this. If they're using an acute model for a chronic problem, right, it's really like immediate gratification. It feeds our system for immediate gratification, that I need this to be solved right now in order to feel better. And it doesn't work. It's like a mismatch on really what's happening. And chronic problems to me seem like they're cumulative effect of acute problems, like acutely overeating or eating wrong, and so if you do that a number of times, if you have too many hangovers, you're going to have some problems. So it's kind of like an acute problem that continues to build into this chronic problem.
Right, exactly. And we make it different things. When we really, really look at the physiology, it's all one thing.
Yeah.
It all comes from all chronic degenerative diseases, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, everything, and autoimmune, everything in between has the same foundation. And so you can wait till it bubbles up to that whatever name you want, and you can deal with that. But that's management. And management doesn't mean fixing. Management means you still have it, but you're more comfortable with it. Yeah. And people don't understand it. They think, well, I got it managed. Well, okay, that means you still got it.
Yeah, but I add to that too. I'll add to that. If it's not getting really better, it's getting worse somewhere.
Well, my favorite line, I say, if you're not actively improving your health, you are passively losing it. Right. It's the default. Yeah. Our society, our culture, our norms, it's a default. And so, but if we back everything up and look at that foundation and correct that, guess what? The other things don't have a leg to stand on, and they start to get better, really better.
And so we come to that center point where you found that insulin resistance. And I know some of the listeners might be thinking, what about leptin? Is that a kissing cousin? Are those two sort of married like the yin and yang together, that you can't really talk about one without the other one being affected? Or is there really...
Well, insulin is the master regulator of all the other hormones, because insulin, you got to think of it as a primal function. Insulin decides if we use energy or we store energy. Keep it simple. Are we going to use it or store it? That's a foundational thing.
So then leptin is just saying, kind of like the guy sitting back going, this is how much energy we have.
Well, insulin is a bully, right? Insulin's a bully on the playground because it's got the number one job in the body to keep us energized, living, essentially. So when insulin's on the scene, the other hormones do play like that, but at the end of the day, what insulin says goes.
You know what? I like that, because there are people that are on the leptin kick, right? And that's been for the last 10 years or so. Leptin's the master hormone and, sort of starvation, survival. But the interesting thing is when a person has type 1 diabetes, they still have leptin in there and they're not functioning.
Well, you can look at it like you got leptins. They're all important players. They're all important players, but you can't fix leptin if insulin's out of whack. You can't fix growth hormone if insulin's out of whack. You can't fix any of them if insulin is dominating and screaming at them. They will follow what insulin says. And you can inject someone with as much leptin or take it out of their system and they will keep going. You do that with insulin and you'll crush the system.
That's what I was saying. You can really live a lot longer without leptin being a player. It can be injured and on the reserves and in the bench or, injured reserve list. But, when he gets better, he can come in and play. But if you do that with insulin, you're going to have real bad problems. You're going to have some really challenges that you're facing neurologically, energetically, and physiologically, and then psychologically. So it really does play a major role.
Absolutely. And the reason why it's so centric is because insulin is one of the few hormones that we can activate a million ways. We can do it with our thoughts, with our behavior, with what we eat, what we don't eat, how we sleep, how we don't sleep. All of that can input it. Whereas you can't do that with testosterone. You can't do that with leptin. You can't do that with most hormones. They follow a sequence or what's called a cascade. Insulin is the start of that cascade.
Because it's so tied into the hormonal and nervous system. That's why people have such a hard time with diabetes because of the neurological complications. It's not just physiological.
Down the road, the effects of the dysregulation of insulin cause all sorts of symptoms and things break down. You basically rot from the inside out because things are not communicating, they're not working well. And then you take the numbers and there's no way to interpret them. And so then we try and we use this treatment model and then we make everything worse, right? Especially when it comes to hormones. Hormones are powerful. Right. Yeah. We want them to whisper. We don't want them to scream, right?
People don't realize that because let's think of like even vitamin D, which is a hormone, right? At the end of the day. And it only needs 30 nanograms per milliliter to have sufficiency. I mean, that is so small. I don't think people realize how tiny 30 nanograms is in 1 milliliter. They really can't fathom it. They can't see how powerful that particular hormone would be. And if you move the needle, double that to 60 nanograms, now you're entering optimal health for vitamin D anyway. And so I'm just giving that as an example, how powerful small amounts of hormones. That's why hormone therapy is really tricky because of the ability to dose it and monitor that dosing.
Well, most the hormones are the most powerful substances to life that there are. Every drug is trying to do what a hormone can do naturally, and they're so powerful that the body will temper it. When the body puts out, just use a generic number, 100 units of a hormone, it'll put out another thing that'll bind and hold back the use of 99% of that. It's so precise.
So it's like that's like sunlight therapy. That's why instead of vitamin D supplements, you get the sunlight. The sunlight will burn off any excess that you don't need.
Well, the sunlight creates a process. It's about the process, not the product.
Right.
The body is demand driven. It's not supply driven. If it was supply driven, I would just supply it with 500 grams of pure protein every day for a year. And at the end, I'd look like a bodybuilder.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. Everyone knows that. But if you create the demand in your body, it'll use everything it has and everything you give it much better, and you'll see a change.
Got it. Wow. So that's why we're trying to use our consciousness in terms of making lifestyle changes to create that demand to change.
Yeah. Well, the body's always changing. Like we said, it's always changing. Either we can have a say in it and hope to direct it, or we will succumb to whatever is going on outside of us.
Oh, wow. And that comes back to the psychology of health. Who's in charge? Who's managing my health? Am I the manager? Well, maybe you might have fired that manager and hired, get access to your real manager, the real spirit in there. All right. So now we have insulin as the centerpiece. And we know that you were saying that a lot of things can influence it, which on a side note, it brings me to this idea of like this whole idea of a continuous glucose monitor is kind of limited then. It's not really telling me. I mean, they're trying to interpret what insulin's doing based on the time when you spike and when you come back to normal blood. but it's not really telling me what's happening with insulin. And it would be amazing if there was a continuous insulin
The problem with
monitor.
testing most hormones is that they're pulsatile. Because they're so powerful, they go out and they go away. They go out and they go away. So like when people do a cortisol test, for example, for stress,
Yeah.
which they think is a stress hormone, but it's really the anti-stress hormone. But anyway, they test it. That might be in your system, even when it's high levels, for 25 minutes, 45 max. And so even if you take multiple tests a day, now you have a number. You don't know how to interpret how that's going on.
Yeah.
And that's one measure in your blood. Just like with the vitamin D, people always want to talk about their number. I'm like, well, is that supplemented or not supplemented? And they're like, well, so I take my supplement. Well, when was the last time you tested it without your supplementation?
Right, because now you're seeing whether you can live without the crutch.
Yeah. Well, it's like if I drink alcohol, you test my blood, there'll be alcohol in my blood. Does it mean my body's producing it? No,
Right.
I'm not in alcoholosis. I'm not, it just means it's there. And so being there isn't the same as using it and making it, because when you make it, there's a 1,000 other pathways that are involved than just that end product. And those pathways are what keep everything else in balance. So if you slam it too much with an outside product, like even vitamin D, or especially a hormone, like hormone replacement, then it just, all that backup just gets all out of whack. And then the problem shows up somewhere else.
A this for that situation.
Exactly.
So
right.
we're trying to go for that immediate gratification, make sure that the numbers are in the supposedly objective range. And then my psyche can take over and say, oh, I'm healthy.
Yep, exactly. I'm doing what's right. I'm okay. And that's that false sense of security.
And it can actually have that placebo effect.
Yeah, well, there's placebo, there's nocebo, there's all different kinds of effects that are involved in there. And it just all goes in your overall goal. If your end goal is quality of life, longevity, and so forth, then you have to look at it differently. Because like if I sprain my ankle, I can take some drugs and medication and I won't feel that ankle. I could probably walk on it. But does it mean it's not sprained? No. Right. Am I doing more damage? Guaranteed. But am I walking? Yes. So if my end objective is just to walk, I succeeded. That it worked. But if it's to heal and not have a problem for the rest of my life, then I failed.
All right. So then now you're coming back to some of your work on your website and on your Facebook page, which is under the same name, Insulin Friendly Living.
The Facebook page is Insulin Friendly Fasting Secrets.
Okay. And there's a couple of other things you got going on there. And people just remember, go back to his website, insulinfriendlyliving.com. There's so much information there. What we're trying to really summarize here is insulin is such a major player in the cascade of chronic degenerative diseases of modern living. And we're trying to get a wrap around the pervasiveness that this problem has. And
it's the number one medical condition worldwide, whether your doctor knows it or not.
And we're trying, I know I am in my work as a coach and your work, we're trying to have people say, it's not about this for that situation. It's about how you're living. We want to shift you into thinking, how am I living that has created this in my life? And then how can I start living so that I can create a new me or a new way of living that is more geared towards empowered health into longevity.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a different way of looking at it, because if people are disempowered and they want health into longevity, they might do what you just said. Well, I'm just sort of existing and I made it. I got the t-shirt that I made it to 100 years old, but I'm in the wheelchair and, I'm in the assisted nursing home and no one visits me and I have dementia setting in, or all the independent or interdependent faculties are now offline, but they're keeping me breathing.
Yeah, exactly. Alive or living, or you want to be alive or do you want to be living? And living, the reason is insulin friendly living is because the behavioral model, especially for weight loss, for insulin factors, for metabolic syndrome, the behavioral side is proving to be more important than what's on the plate. It's more important than what we can measure. So for behavior, you can't just say, here's a good foods list, here's a bad foods list, here's the to-dos and the not to-dos, because it's so much more personal. And it has to be, because where you're at, it has to do with your health history, where you're at now and where you want to go. So the behavioral model is huge. I want to switch my title to behavioral nutrition. Some people think it's an oxymoron because they conflict a little bit, but no, it's because it's how we engage through our life with our environment, and that's what the body does. The body, all it does is interpret and responds. It's not driving anything. It's just we're interpreting and responding. What's going on? And food is our number one source of information. It's not fuel. It's that we got to stop that thinking. Food is fuel, and you look at it that way, you're going to be in for a surprise. Food is information. You're telling your body something, and your body is listening, and it will respond. How it responds depends on what we tell it.
I got the same principle thought process in that, which is food. If food was fuel, then how come we're all depressed and low energy? It's not. It's impossible for food to be fuel or to provide so-called energy that would be any kind of lasting, because then everybody should have all the energy they need to manifest the dreams in their life. Yeah. So, but food is intelligence, and it contains the information from the earth, the water, the sun, the air. It also has
the geographics.
Yeah,
everything.
It has energetics. It has the imprint of the farmer, their intent, their methodologies, or whether it's processed food, you're eating that information. And then our digestive system is a CD track, kind of reading it.
Yeah,
you just put the CD in, and it goes down into the cassette player, and then it interprets it. And then it's basically taking one source of so-called energy and trying to convert it into energy for human use. So it's not about creating energy, because energy can't be created or destroyed. It could just be transformed or transcended. So it's just transforming energy so that we can use it as human energy. Just like water falling off of a cliff, we take that energy stored or running, and we transform that into electric energy or whatever other energy.
That's what, when people talk about energy, cellular energy, calories in the energy, we're not making energy. We're making units for energy. We're making logs to put in the fire, so to speak. Yeah. And when we look at it from a food is fuel, and you go to that caloric model, calories in, calories out, we set ourselves up for a problem, because the body is not a closed linear system. The laws of thermodynamics, if you read the whole law, the second law, it applies to a closed linear system. All things being equal, then this happens. All things are not equal in the body. It's an open dynamic system, which means it's impossible to count calories. You have no idea what your body's going to do with that in that moment, if you're going to get the full caloric load, or if it's going to go for structure. Some nutrients and some calories that come into our body never get used for energy. How do you calculate that? It's impossible. And it's one of those false securities we get on, because we can see weight loss. You can see some weight loss, but not the weight that will save your life. Mm-hmm. Your body works on a priority scale, and it will always save your butt before it shrinks your butt.
Yeah, that's a true statement.
Yeah, get through that.
Yeah, I think that's why it took so long for people to start seeing that I was actually getting somewhat healthy with all the work and all the things I was doing. It's because the body had a priority of building things internally to support the external. So as that stuff's going on, repairing and rejuvenating an organ, a gland, any of these things that need to be done prior, it took a long time from all the damaging effects that I had from chemotherapy and radiation and bone marrow and all this stuff. So it was a lot of preparatory work, which we know the preparation is the most demanding, the most longest time, the planning, the prep, before the finished carpentry comes in.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the big changes are built on small foundational changes that we do every day. And that's why when you understand that part of the physiology, there are things you can do today and you can feel better tomorrow. It can be that fast. Is it everything changing at once? No, but can you see the change? You can make changes every moment of the day. You can, by what you eat, what you don't eat, by how you move, by how you don't move, by the combination of the food, by what you're thinking and how you sleep, and everything. All of that is an opportunity to push you towards where you want to go, or have you continue to break down.
So that's on the onus of who's managing your life, who's managing the process of your life. And if you've given yourself away, we're asking you to recover that. Come back home, take control of your life, and start to acknowledge that you have some control right now to make a choice. And you have a lot of offerings on your website to help people to start to navigate what choices, I have to get my choices back. So I have to know what my choices are, because I haven't learned that. So I need some education and guidance. So again, go back to Don Clum's website, insulinfriendlyliving.com, and more information. So let's talk about how someone could maybe think about how they could assess where they might be on the insulin resistance spectrum. That might be simple, or even like going to their doctor for a blood test, a couple blood tests.
Yeah, it's not as simple as like blood sugar. You take it, you get a number, high, low, but blah, blah, blah.
Doesn't tell you anything.
It can be misleading. It actually puts you on the wrong road. So how do you know if you're insulin resistance is a spectrum? In our life today, 88% of Americans are considered metabolically unhealthy. They are not in the healthy range. So even if you're thinking maybe, you got to think it's going on. The question is how bad?
Yes.
Right. It's just the way it is. So different ways you can test. The easiest one, and one with some of the best data, is to do a waist measurement. Get a Taylor's tape measure. I usually have one around. I don't right now. And just the flexible tape measure, and right around your belly button, make sure it's even, and measure that. If you're over 35 inches for a woman, 35 inches is the threshold, or 40 for a man, so around that belly button, that's a positive marker for metabolic syndrome. I say that 38.5 for a man and above, that's positive for insulin resistance. It can be suspect before that, but that's definitely you're there. And then for women, it's if it's 35, we do 33.5. Right. So I'm sorry, it was women are 33.5, men are at 38. That's what it is. Yeah. 38. So 2 inches off that one. Yeah. And so, because the tipping point isn't in 1 inch at that fine line, just like when you have blood sugar and the doctor says it's normal because it's 99. Yeah. But when it hits 100, now you're pre-diabetic. Right. What's the difference there? Well, it's already going on. 80% of the damage physiologically done by diabetes happens before the blood sugar is out of the normal range.
So it's 80%. Actually it's like, again, it's that long preparatory phase that's happening underneath that we don't see, but then you see the finished work and it's like, oh, now it's happening. But with these measurements, you can start to see it, because if you're in different cultures have different numbers. Asians have smaller numbers. Yeah. Then the Europeans a little bit bigger. Americans, we give the most leeway, which might be a mistake. But if your waist circumference is getting bigger, even if you're not gaining weight, that's a problem. That's coming from the inside out. Insulin resistance. Okay. The other one, if you get say if you're gaining weight, if you've gained weight and lost weight multiple times, we're talking as an adult, so 5, 6, 7 times over the last 10, 15 years, you got to assume you have an insulin resistant state. It's because you can't fluctuate back and forth like that too much without stressing. So large, like fairly large weight fluctuations, like 5% of your body weight, or
it only takes about 20 pounds.
All right.
Some people can be as low as 5, but that's more harder to discern. But any up and down, or if you notice, here's what I hear. I gain weight, go up and down. I know what to do. I was not doing my thing. So I gained the weight. I do XYZ and I lose it. Mm-hmm. Happened this time. I did XYZ. It didn't work, or I got worse. Something has changed physiologically. And that's a right there. If you have what that's called weight loss resistance, if you do what you normally do to get things under control and they don't get under control, there's something has changed, and that's a problem. Okay. You can look at normal blood tests. Everyone gets cholesterol tests and blood sugar tests when they get a physical. You can use that to give you an idea. For example, if your triglycerides in the cholesterol test are over 100, you can consider that insulin resistance, because insulin is tightly correlated very well with triglycerides. Metabolic syndrome is 150 or higher, but if you wait until that point, it's going to be harder. You can see it at 100. If your HDL, or the good cholesterol, drops, if it starts to go low, then that's another indicator, insulin resistance, because insulin is the master regulator of these type of things. If your cholesterol numbers are really high, there's an insulin the problem, because insulin tells the body to make it. Okay, and the cholesterol in your blood is not from your diet. It's from your body. It's human cholesterol. That's not pig cholesterol or even avocado cholesterol floating around. That's your body making it for a reason, and insulin resistance could be driving that. There are other factors, like if you can't skip a snack or a meal in a day without feeling it, that's a bad sign. You can tell someone's metabolic health by how long they can go comfortably without food. If you can't go a half a day and you start to get weak, dizzy, irritable, hangry, you got metabolic syndrome starting, and you definitely have insulin resistance going on. Or if you eat and you are hungry within an hour of eating, or you start to eat, you can't stop. Right? An open bag of chips is an empty bag of chips kind of concept. We're like, where did this empty box of cookies come from? Almost like a food blackout. It's real. It's the same addiction pathway as drugs and alcohol. And when it kicks in, that's insulin taking over right there. And so those are some of the easy tests. There's other ones that you can look at. Vitamin D is a great one because they work on a teeter-totter. If vitamin D is low, insulin resistance is high, because an insulin resistance will hold vitamin D down. You can take all this, you can take a bottle of vitamin D supplement a day. You can sit in the sun until you are as tan as can be. It's not going to change. It can't. This has to come down if this is going to come up. So that's a great one. If you get one test, it's not a standard test, but it's pretty common now. You can get them at home in some states.
Yeah.
Vitamin D, that's a big one.
Yeah, there's two tests that some people get confused about, because it is the 25 vitamin D test, not the 125 OH D, because the 125 is the active form from the kidney, which is just responsible for communicating with the digestive tract to absorb calcium. We want the actual storage kind, or the one that's in the blood, not storage, but in the blood, which is the 25.
If either one of them are low, because vitamin D changes. There's many kinds of vitamin D.
Yeah,
we just test one,
right?
And it's somewhere in that change, but it's not the entire picture. It can tell us if we got something going on for sure.
Yeah, it's just remember, this is not a perfect science in terms of blood tests. It's basically coming across those three things: the psychology of your health. Is your psychology improving with what you're doing? Are you feeling empowered in your choices, and you're not feeling that sense of what we have talked about is food freedom?
Yeah.
Am I a slave to food, or am I really the master to whatever degree of food? And food mastery is a real challenge in our culture, because we eat because we can. We eat because we're emotionally driven. We eat because we're bored. We eat because of and we might eat because we're hungry, but 88% of us probably don't know that the hunger signal anyway.
That's a huge one. The freedom from hunger. As Americans, we're into our freedom. That's a freedom most people will never even know exists, never mind attain, to be able to be truly detached from that. And a lot of what you said, we find when the metabolic syndrome is going downhill, was not doing well, it creates different symptoms, not just physically, but mentally. Emotional eating, cravings, binge eating, a lot of them are symptoms. Lack of motivation, inability to finish tasks, concentration, all can be a symptom of what's going on metabolically. So we start to treat all the mental side, and things don't get better. We just kind of float along. Maybe we feel better about what we're doing, but we're not changing. You change the physiology, and guess what? That indecision goes away. The motivation comes back, and suddenly the person who thought they had lost all willpower and they're weak are strong, because they are symptoms, not the cause. In a lot of cases, there are some, but it's the rare case. Yeah. I've worked with thousands of people on this, and we tracked it, and they come in with the badge of honor that I am an emotional eater, right? They convince, and that's their reality for 20 years or whatever it is. And they start to do these changes, and the physiology change. We revisit those questions, and then we say, hey, what about your emotional eating of this, and that? And they go, oh, I forgot about that. No, I don't really have that anymore. No work on the psychology, which isn't bad, but the body changed, the expression and the mind changed as well.
Yeah, there is this notion that you have to think positive before you make changes. And that doesn't work if your mind is mixed up. And so what we do is, and what you leaned in on earlier, was positive behavior will change the psychology.
Yeah.
So if you actually know that the reason why I go and exercise throughout the day, and I do movement therapy throughout the day, is because I know I'm going to get an immediate effect that makes me happier, lighter, more motivated, more creative, or more hopeful. So I get that I took an action, a behavioral change that shifted my psychology, because it shifted the biochemistry for sure. And that's part of the plan, right? You get the assessment. So everybody, in terms of a quick synopsis, you measure your waistline, and you have under 38 if you're a man, under 35 if you're a woman, and that's being fairly lenient for our culture. But if someone like me is 33 and I still might have signs of insulin resistance, because that could fool people where they're skinny fat kind of thing, or they still could have, kind of like a metabolic,
We call it the skinny fat syndrome.
yeah,
Because when I had a practice in Long Island near the Hamptons, we had a lot of people who had time and money and they took good care of themselves. And I think it's great. And so they look like the yoga mom and the tennis dad. But when we did the test, they had as much of the life-threatening, dangerous fat in their organs and viscera as someone who's morbidly obese, who's not doing any of that. So that's a big paradox. So they look in the mirror and we judge by looking and we think they're fine. That's the one that says, oh, he was out for a jog and he fell over in a heart attack. He was fine yesterday.
That's the same thing. All right. So that's why these are the people that, because they look okay, successfully, they've got the money, they've got the look, and they've got the, like you said, the yoga membership, the golf membership, all this stuff looks good. But now they're afraid to take a look. They're afraid to get some objective blood tests for vitamin D or triglycerides, or maybe even, fasting insulin to see what's going on. And then they're afraid of the soul taking a look internally, like to turn around and sit down in meditation and say, wait a minute, let me take a look and be honest. And so I don't get sidelined. They're very resistant to that because they don't have a reason to.
Yeah.
In their mind.
The problem is the system doesn't have a reason to either. The doctor doesn't think to do extra tests because there's no indication according to their model. Whereas in the reality is there are more people at normal weight with metabolic syndrome than there are morbidly obese.
That's incredible.
By numbers.
That's
and
incredible.
They're walking around and they don't even know it. There's over 90 million people with pre-diabetes right now, adults only, right? And 90% of them have no idea. 25% of people with type 2 diabetes, over 16 million people, they don't even know they have it. And that's a big miss.
And I think that's another way that people continue on their path of this model where the doctor is looking for something acute that they can treat. They don't test for the potential of what's happening. All right, so what they do is they see the medical model. I'm not picking on it in a direct sense. Indirectly, though, with chronic degenerative disease, I'm going to pick on it. I'm going to lean on them. Is they're looking to see how sick you are. They're not assessing if they're looking at that, right?
They're looking at whatever you tell them. And how do you know what to tell them?
Yeah. And so, I mean, at best, they're looking for you if you're presenting sickness, and then they have something to work with. And they're not really there to see how healthy you are. How healthy are you? And how healthy do you want to get? And so it is a disease management system or a sickness management system. And, unfortunately, folks, I'm going to just throw this back there. This is a backhand, I guess, to the system. It's a business model, and every business wants to grow and survive. And they also love repeat loyal customers. I hate to say it, gang, but there it is.
It's an easier model as a practitioner. It's easy, it's quick, it's easy. You don't have to do a lot. The wellness, the health improvement, optimization, that's a harder model. You got to spend time. You got to talk to people. You got to explain. It's multifaceted, and that's hard to do when you're already waiting an hour to see your doctor so they can write one script.
Yeah. So it's first we have to turn inspiration on in the individual, or validate that inspiration somehow. And then you have to work with the psychology to turn that on. And then we have to help them with their accountability to take that action that they said they were going to do, because it is hard to take accountability when you don't feel good.
Well, I think it comes down to education, because it has to make sense to you, and you have to decide when's enough. When is enough?
Yeah.
I could show people on with their tests, they will get diabetes within 5 to 10 years. Statistically, it's over 93% chance. You're going down that road. Is that enough for someone to make a change? A lot of times not. Yeah. Sometimes an amputation isn't enough for them to make a change. That's the psychology. What is it going to take to make this change? Because if you wait till something crashes, it's much harder to get that back than if you were maybe a year later, maybe 6 months later. It's amazing what can happen and change in 6 months, but you got to do it. No one can do it for you.
Yeah. Took me decades after all my medical models.
It's an evolution. It's constantly happening. We're on target. Sometimes we're off target. Sometimes we have stressful times. We have unstressful. We move. We change jobs. That's normal. We have to have something built around that, not something that will show up when things crash only. right? It's if we don't have a plan or a guide or something or commitment to, at least to ourselves, then we'll never get through those. We talk about stress resilience. It's not stress avoidance. That didn't work. We tried that for years. It's not even stress management. Good luck with that, right? It's stress resilience, meaning that you are better for that stress and not worse. That is constructive, not destructive. Same stress, because we're not going to get rid of it. Managing it hasn't worked either. How do we make it work for us? How do we make stress our worker? How does it?
Yeah, that's another part of what I coach is we want to become anti-fragile. You know, instead of, you know, there's people that are fragile, and then there's people that are resilient, right? And then there are people that are anti-fragile, which means the stress makes me stronger.
Yeah, well, that's what's happening. Look at our culture right now. We have this big bad bug that we've changed our entire world for. It's not a big bad bug. It's a bug that's been around. It's like every other bug, but we are weak, so weak that this little bug can threaten our entire existence. That we change our entire system. We shut down our country. We keep kids out of school. We throw masks on people, all because we make it sound like it's because of the thing. It's not. The system is that weak that someone could breathe outside and risk death. That is a weak system. And we, instead of focusing on how do we strengthen the system, we try to avoid all of the contact. It's not going to happen. Virus has been around forever. So is this one.
And right? I almost think they don't go away. I like this idea though, is that the virus or any virus is actually a universal, the universe's upgrade to our software. So we're having injury and insult and damage to our tissue and cells from some way, some place. And so the survival mechanism of our body from our creator is saying, you need to survive. So I need to help you. And the way to upgrade your computer system, just like our laptops or anything else, I've got to download this particular, download it or create it from within, whatever, and allow you to move through that so you become stronger. And so that's another model, but people have become afraid of nature and the process of surviving according to nature. And they're not afraid of the potato chips and the processed food and the heavy metals or someone injecting some foreign stuff into your body. We're not afraid of that, but we're afraid of going out and patting dogs, letting them lick us and playing in the dirt and eating our vegetables without washing them, you know, stuff like that.
Everything. If we could seal someone up right now, every virus we've ever known is there.
It's already there. Yeah.
It's already there. There's 1,000 viruses to every cell in and on our body right now. Wow, we are outnumbered. There's 100 bacteria for every cell in our body. We are more by number bacteria and virus than we are human, if you really want to look at it. So it's not about limiting contact. Hand sanitizer is not going to keep those 1,000 per cell away at all. They're there. Whether they express and how they express, now that we can control, but that comes down to lifestyle.
Yeah. And I say this and I tell people, they said, you know, how did you cure your cancer? How did you rise above that? And I'm telling you, well, wait, time out. Let me just tell you something. I didn't cure my cancer yet. I don't have tumors in my body, but we're swimming in a field of potential injury and insult to our bodies all the time. So the cure, that has to be determined at my death, you know, if I've actually cured it. So let me be humble, because I had it 6 times, gang. So I want to be humble that it hasn't been cured yet until I know.
Cancer is a normal process. Everyone it has it.
Yeah.
How it stays under control or not, that depends on certain things, but that's a normal, just like diabetes and insulin resistance. That's a natural process. Almost every animal goes through it. That's what bears do before they hibernate. They get metabolic syndrome and they're in a pre-diabetic state. Yeah. So do birds before they migrate. So do fish before they go dormant. It's in us. It's there for a reason.
It's a cyclical cycle. Yeah, it's a part of our cycle. And I think, like what Andreas Maurice wrote, cancer is not a disease. It's a survival mechanism. It's just another form of a survival mechanism.
If we were living naturally, it would never get to a point where we could even detect it, because those cells have a role, but at a lower level. Yeah. When those don't get managed, then they get to the higher level that we're never supposed to express, because we're not doing or living naturally.
Right. And so what I was coming full circle was I was living an ignorant and arrogant life. I mean, it just comes down to it. That's what That's the contribution that I had to manifesting that particular expression of disease, like not at ease, right? It could have been expressed in any number of ways, but they all come from that same place. I'm living ignorantly and arrogantly in some way. And taking ownership of that was the start of my healing at the Psychology of Health. It was like, wait a minute, I am responsible for my part in creating this particular problem. So therefore, by owning that, I think I can start the process of creating health and well-being. It's just the opposite way of living. And insulin resistance, I know, is in my family from type 2 diabetes kind of stuff.
It's in everyone's, it's in our genetics.
It's part of us. You're saying it's actually a system. It's a survival system.
Yes, because insulin resistance allows us to store some fat that we can use fast, like we can sugar. Yeah. Okay, body fat. Think of body fat as a trust you have in your name. To get the money out of that trust, you have to fill out a paperwork. You got to transfer from here to here, there. You got to wait until it clears, and then you get it. Do you get it? Yeah. Is there some steps involved? Yeah. But do you get the money? Sure. Whereas glucose and sugar in our system, in our stores, is like cash in our pockets. Yeah. You don't have to go through that process. I want to buy something, I buy it right now. Now, the fat in our viscera that causes diabetes, everything else, with insulin resistance, that's kind of somewhere in between. That's like having a big bill in your pocket. Now, you don't have to go through the process to pull it from your trust, and it might not be quite as easy to spend as the small bills, but you can break it and use it now. And so it puts it in there because it knows we're setting up to need that, like getting through a winter, right? Like a hibernation, they're not eating. They go through that, like the migration. They're about to fly sometimes 1,000 miles, right? So it's preparing for that. So it has the small bills, the big bills, and it still can access the body fat in the trust or the savings account if it needs to. So it's there for a reason. The problem is we get that money ready to be spent, but we never spend it. We keep it there, and that's a problem. That builds up over time.
So if anybody of you have your bank account and you're storing all that money, you got to start spending some.
And insulin is a gatekeeper. Insulin is your Aunt Greta, who's always saying, put half of that in your savings. Don't spend it all. Put half. She's always there, and you want to spend your money. It's frustrating. It's you got it. You got the number, but the Aunt Greta's yelling on your shoulder, won't let you have it. You know, I like Aunt Greta, but she can go home after the party, right? And so we want to control it, and that's what we want to do. We want to get insulin off our shoulder so we can use the energy we have. If we can't do that, then we might. Who wants to die with a big bank account and in rags?
You know, it's interesting. The same amount of pressure that a person that might be obese with the weight on them might be the same thing with a person with a lot of money in the bank and don't know how to live.
Yeah. Well,
even though they're not obese or anything, right? But they have that same psychological weight on them of, oh my God, my account just dropped 5%, or nervous about the stock market, or that weight and stuff is kind of a similar psychological effect. Wow.
I have a picture that I really like to use. It's a tanker, like a truck, 18 with a big old tank of gas on it, and it's on the side of the road out of gas.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
That's people. We're using the little gas tank for the engine when we're carrying this huge potential stores that can run a city, and we don't know how to access it.
Amazing, right? That's true. And so there could be damage that people have to work on to repair in order to go and access it. So in other words, that's what was happening in my life, is repairing some of my metabolic systems, digestive, things that play a role, the digestive system, circulatory system, whatever, in order for me to start to actually then be concerned about, build health now. I got to actually repair the damage first.
Yes.
And so people that have been in this state of insulin resistant metabolic syndrome for a long time, they have damage.
Yeah.
And that damage, it's an injury. And what I like to rephrase, what I like to consider people is, you need to get metabolic rehabilitation. And just like if you broke a leg and your bone is broken and you need to put a cast on, that means you can't do the same activities that you used to do while the bone sets. And then when you take the cast off, you still can't do the same things. You got to go into the actual healing process again until you start to really work hard enough to get it back to better than functioning before. Yeah. So if you're metabolically challenged, like 88% of us, I know I am to more or less a degree, and now we have to put a cast on us, but it's a psychological cast.
Well,
Nobody's
there's four things. There's four physiological changes that have to happen if you want to reverse that condition. And they're independent of other factors that we think. So for example, you have to get the fat out of the liver and pancreas. You have to. It's called ectopic fat. It's not supposed to be in there long term. We talked about it for hibernation. We're not hibernating. So that's number one. You have to get the fat out of the organs, mainly the liver and the pancreas. Excuse me. Number two, the pancreas over time defends itself by changing the cells that make insulin into different cells. They're from stem cells originally as we form, and they get enough abuse, they will actually change what they are, and we don't see them anymore. And so it's not producing insulin. Those cells have to morph, have to change back. That's number two. So get the fat out of the organs, and the cells have to change back to make insulin. And then the other one is the carriers, the UPS drivers who shuttle our fat in and out of our storage or the bank vault, whatever you want to look at it, they are on strike. When you have insulin resistance, you have to get them back, right? They have to be working. Otherwise, you can't get it out and you can't put it in, and it all backs up, right? You need the workers.
Yes.
You got to get the workers. That's number three. And number four is you have to become more glycogen efficient or increase your glycogen capacity. What does that mean? Our muscles can range in its ability to store that cash. You want to have a big wallet, not a little wallet. You want to carry around some nice bills, not a handful of change. People who have insulin resistance, they're just carrying around pennies. They got change. So we have to increase that capacity, and that comes through intensity work and other things. But that has the difference between someone with type 2 diabetes and say a competitive athlete is 4,000% difference in their ability to have that cash in their pocket, to have that stored glucose in their muscles. Even if we're halfway through, 2,000% is a big difference. You have to improve that because that's part of the metabolic flexibility so things don't go haywire. So those are the four things. Increase glycogen storage in the muscle. You have to get the fat out of the liver and the pancreas. You have to get the cells that make insulin to start to change back. And you got to get the workers who do all the work in between to get back on the job. You do those four things, and you no longer have a metabolic issue or insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes even. You leave one out, or you do one and maybe just lose some body weight, or you do one and you drop your blood sugar number to a normal range. You still have the other three. Guess what? You're still diabetic. You're still going down the road. You still get all the problems. Just now you have better numbers.
Wow. So now we come back to the basics of living as movement and nutrition. I mean, it really comes back to those two, yin and yang, whatever. You have to be nourished in a certain way, and you have to move in a certain way to make the necessary shift. And that is something that's probably a little bit too much for us to go down the rabbit hole here. But if there was, maybe we could do another talk on just movement therapy and some strategies nutritionally. But my understanding is because you are someone that is so passionate about fasting, it seems like that is one of the big bang things we can do. Is it's not what we're eating initially, it's how often we're eating.
Not how much you eat, it's how often you eat. It's frequency. You don't have to cut back on the volume. You got to come back on how many times you're putting food in your mouth, right? We start people just go to 3 meals a day before we even tell them what they should change on the plate. Stay away from this or add this, doesn't matter. Just do it. Just eat all your food for the day. Don't have to cut it back.
Yeah.
Just do it in breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's it. No snacking in between, before or after. People who are metabolically sick and do that will start to shift with just that change alone. People can lose weight with just that change alone. That's it. And then we haven't even taken the Fritos out of the diet yet.
Right.
They're just eating 3 times a day and 3 times only. That means no foo-foo coffee in between. That means no, handful of nuts as a snack, even if it's healthy, 3 times a day, and you will start to improve.
So have the coffee with your meal.
Yeah.
Right. And have the glass of wine with a meal. And here's the thing, because if people love to be in the kitchen and cook, be mindful of all the times you're tasting stuff. Right. That's a real trick, because you can eat quite a bit of frequency in that hour of preparation of a meal.
Well, think about making your kids lunch and you want to make them peanut butter and jelly. If that's what you're thinking, how many times do you lick that spoon?
Right. Yeah.
And it could be a meal.
And right there is also the sign of, or an opportunity, a challenge to say, wait a minute, I have to take my power back. I don't need to taste it. I know what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich tastes like. I don't need to taste it. So you have to take your power back and say, wait, I don't need food right now. I don't, do I need food or do I want food? Those are two questions people can ask in that moment. And usually it's, I want food.
Yes.
I don't need it. I just want it. Because why? Some people will say we have a disease of affluence. We can get it. And and I hate to say that, and not discrediting people that are challenged with their finances these days in social economics, but a lot of people are suffering from their health because of their affluence. They can just buy it. They can have whatever they want.
Absolutely. And the reality is that's a behavioral model, changing the frequency of what we eat. If hunger, for example, acute hunger, if you get hungry in a day from one thing, that's not hunger. If we got weak and we got distracted and then we had to sit down or dizzy every time we skipped a meal, our species would have been extinct a long time ago.
Yeah.
The opposite happens in our body. We actually increase our energy. Our mental focus will narrow when we fast. Why? Because the body's going, okay, you're not eating. Let's go get some food. Let's get you ready. And that's what was going on in your body. But we interpret these things as hunger or as something else, or like it's pathological if we skip a meal and we have a stomach growl like that. You can't do that. In fact, when parents say to the people, they say, well, I'd rather that's better than nothing. I want him to have something better than nothing. No, actually nothing was better than that. Yes. One you just gave your kid.
It brings up a great point.
Sometimes the most nutritious meal people get is the one they skip.
Yeah. It's so funny because that growling in the stomach, if I skip my meal, that growling in the stomach is not a growling for hunger. It's a growling for cleansing. Healing is starting to take place. People don't get the messages. They forget the message. Like that, some of that burping or upper stomach growling, I have to be mindful that sometimes just the body's cleaning out. It's finally getting empty and the organ is going to start to shrink. So it's not always stretched out from always having full, or it's always there.
If nothing else, it has to reset. That's all. It's got acid in there. You drop stuff in it, it changes, and it's got to reset. And sometimes you can feel it. I mean, we're so hypersensitive because when people fast, they go through that like crazy. They go, oh, wait, I feel that. Am I hungry? Is it because I'm fasting? Oh, wait, I think I have a headache. Is that because I'm fasting? Oh, I got a flat tire. Is that because I'm fasting? And they want to blame everything. And suddenly, what they couldn't feel anything before, they feel every breath. Right. It's
great. It's self-awareness. This is where it starts. And that perception is awareness of how your body functions and what's going on.
The interpretation is what's bad because they'll break. I couldn't because I got dizzy. I said, what does dizzy mean? Well, I stood up and I felt weird. What does that mean? I don't know. But they're looking for a reason because you want to make people really get wonky. Take away their food.
I get it. Yeah.
When people talk to me, they don't like to talk to me, especially I don't talk to anyone around the holidays. No one wants to talk to me. Right. But if I'm talking about fasting in the public, I've even had like a server who's taken our order over here and they will come out with an opinion. They'll tell me how I'm dying or I'm killing somebody. And I'll be like, nice to meet you. I'm Don. You don't even know who these people, and the opinions come out. That means this is a core issue. This is messing with people's psyche on some level.
On a big level, actually. That's one of the things I love about, I have been practicing extended fast, but I've probably been doing it a little wrong, which is fine. I can learn from it. And that's why I'm having this conversation with you and hopefully going to align with you in the future is the fasting, the extended fast, 5 days. It was Dr. Pompa's work, right? From Revelation Health and Health Centers of the Future.
I've worked with them on many projects.
Right. And so I love the challenge because it gets me to it brings me to honesty. It brings me to pure honesty of how healthy I am. It brings me to honesty how psychologically clear I am. It brings me to so many things because the energy of food, thinking about it, preparing it, cleaning, eating, the finances, all that goes away.
Yeah. Couples especially like it because the big part of people's existence, they live from meal to meal. Right. Business lunch, coming home. What am I going to cook? Running late. The kids get something different. It's a huge.
Oh, I had a hard week, honey. Let's go out to dinner. It's so ingrained in our fabric that it does create a slavery process in that emotional addiction to it, where I don't know how to have pleasure without it.
No, it becomes a reward, and then suddenly we're rewarding everything, right? Every
And
single thing.
it's a negative reward, right? So it's a negative reinforcement, meaning it means that I think it's a positive by saying I worked hard, I'm going to take this, I'm going to have this meal and this booze and this wine and stuff like that. But then the negative happens. It, like the next day, you don't feel on your A game, you feel a little groggy, et cetera, et cetera. So now you just rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak.
Exactly. The addictive pathways, the addiction pathway in our body is also natural. It's there for a reason. It saved our species for a long time. It's what got us through the summer, through the winters when food was scarce or we had to make some changes, right? If without our addiction pathways, we would have been extinct. Now that the addiction pathway that saved us is killing us because we're feeding it over and over with so many different things, and it's just doing what it's designed to do.
Yeah, we're not getting that natural cycle of feast or famine on a
Yeah,
daily basis
food,
or a weekly or cyclical nature, or even an inconsistent cycle, right? It's like, I don't know if I'm going to have food next week, kind of thing.
exactly. And the main trigger for that is fructose. Fructose is what the pathway was built around. So you can think about it evolutionarily speaking, fruit comes in season usually one time a year, depending on the place. And it comes in a lot. It comes in, but it doesn't stay long.
Right.
And as a species, we would eat that and we'd put on the visceral fat, that big bill energy we're talking about,
yep,
and some body fat, because then when it's no longer ripe and we go into the winter, vegetation's gone, animals are scarce, we had to go lean, and we could.
That's
Now
interesting.
fructose is in everything, and it drives that so strong. Fructose has no other purpose in the body. We don't use it for energy. We don't. Right. It's not like sugar's a sugar. It's not used for structure. It goes through one pathway through the liver and is broken down because it's actually a toxin in our system. Fructose is the same as alcohol in your body. It's the same thing, same pathway. It's all the same. Once it's in you, other than getting the buzz, that's the only difference because of one step of fermentation before we drink.
Oh yeah, because you can turn fruit into wine. I mean, come on.
Yeah, go ahead. Try to turn olive oil into wine.
Right, doesn't happen.
Yeah, or to your steak. It doesn't happen. But fructose will. Sugar does. That's the
and
step.
so especially fructose. And so that's why if people have a candida or a yeast problem, they can actually create their own alcohol from excess fruit.
Yeah, exactly. That step in a natural food happens in our gut and there's no problem. When we do it in a distill and we drink it, now we just bombard it.
We went past the pathway. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing. Yeah.
So people will often say, oh, the brain prefers sugar or glucose. The body prefers glucose. It needs glucose. It doesn't. It prioritizes glucose because it's toxic if it stays in our system. Fructose is toxic immediately. That's why it doesn't go into your body. It doesn't get past the liver. The liver is a gatekeeper. It will not let that pass because of the ill effects, and it's focuses. Right. That's why non-alcoholic fatty liver is the #1 liver disease in the world. They call it non-alcoholic because it used to only happen with who? Alcoholics. Right. Why? Because it's the same pathways, the same thing, identical. Yeah. You take away their history, and if you didn't know they were alcoholic or they're eating sugar, you cannot tell the difference between the two.
So yeah, so if you laid a liver out on the table and it was all fatty, you'd say, I don't know if this was a drinker or just someone that was a fruitaholic.
Or not fruit. It's not going to really come from fruit. It does. Fruit contributes, but it's all the processed fructose. Table sugar is half.
So yeah, that's a true statement, because I think the whole complex fruit is a different beast in terms of the food matrix, rather than the isolated high fructose corn syrups, or even just cane sugar, which is 50% fructose.
Yeah.
And that's very calorically dense in that, because a tablespoon of that can go in quick and you're getting quite a good load of fructose, especially if the blood only handles 5 to 8 grams of blood, sugar, and 7 liters of blood. I mean, that's a very small amount.
1 more gram, your diabetic. All the difference between normal and diabetic is 1 gram of sugar.
It's
1 gram.
Insane. That's so 3 grams, sensitive.
3 grams, you're in the hospital and you could die.
Right. And so
that's a half a pack of sugar at the diner.
It's incredible, because if you if kids are getting their fruit juice, which is it comes from
40 grams right there,
but it's it could be potentially up to 40 grams in a 50-pound baby, like adolescent. And then they wonder why he's having terrible twos.
And remember that fructose cannot get to the body. It stops the liver. The liver can only process so much. And when it can't process it, it makes it into the fat we're
Triglycerides.
talking about, visceral fats.
Is
Well,
it?
triglycerides is one of them, but it can only do that so fast. 40
I see.
grams is a lot.
Yeah.
So it'll make it, every time we eat it, it makes visceral fat and organ fat. It has to. That's where the big bills get stored.
And then you have to know how to access that and spend it in order to keep a natural balance and keep yourself metabolically flexible.
Yep.
And that's
exactly.
essentially through what we were just saying, 3 meals a day, or work your way
It's
into
through a
intermittent
certain
fasting.
state. That state can be activated, like you mentioned, with exercise. That's why we feel good. Fasting, that's why we feel good. And then there's others, we activate that state, and there's a lot of ways to do it. Learning, all of that can activate, and that'll take it out. So it's not about the one modality, exercise, fasting, ketosis, or whatever it is. It's about the state they produce.
Yeah.
We're in a fed state all the time. That's the negative state. We are in a fed state. When you eat, you break down food. Make sense? Chew, right? Your whole body goes into breakdown mode.
Yeah.
It breaks down more protein and muscle and tendons and things while you're eating than when you're not. That's
because they want to repair the muscles when you're not.
Yeah, you turn on the recycling system. The body's a master recycler. It will recycle 7 times more protein in a day than you eat. So we're trying to count our grams of how much protein we should have. It's maybe 12% of the whole thing. And if you don't get it, guess what the body does? It recycles more. It's amazing. So we want the body to do the work and not us try to force in what we think it should do.
I need more protein, so I'm going to eat a protein shake after my workout. Really,
which stimulates insulin like crazy.
Yeah. So really, what you really want is just a hot and cold water shower after your workout.
What you want is time.
Yeah.
And the other thing is when we eat today, that sugar, those nutrients aren't what goes through our body today. Think of a corn, when they have big farms with corn, they have a silo.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where they store the corn.
Yeah.
They take big trucks and they pour it in the top and it fills up. Now, if you want to take that corn out, where do you get it?
From the bottom.
From the bottom.
Yeah.
It's all corn, but the corn you get out here is not the corn that's up here.
Certainly
Same
isn't.
thing. The body's got to process all that. It goes through a filter. So the energy and stuff we're using today isn't even from that meal.
Right.
Just because the blood sugar goes up, it doesn't mean it was from that plate or that drink or whatever we did. The body releases it. It's already doing that. And so the more we understand that as part of a continuum, then the idea that you have to force a post-workout drink or do these macros or this and that, it seems silly. Because all we're doing is trying to make the body do something we want it to do when it knows what to do and is trying to, and we're holding it back.
All right. So we're trying to go against nature and create something that is really kind of unnatural. And so to the more degree we do that, we're going to have problems show up somewhere.
Yeah.
And
the body needs no help. It needs no help. It doesn't need us to think this thing through. It needs no help. It needs no interference. And sometimes our best efforts to help it is big time interference, and we're slowing it down, right? You don't have to detox. You don't have to do a detox. If you stop retoxing, your body will automatically start detoxing.
Well, 3 meals a day seems like it would be a detox for people.
For a lot of people, it is.
You know what I mean? And just going and doing some form of exercise that you haven't been doing is a detox, because it's shifting the psyche and detoxifying the mind. It
goes from fed to repair. It shifts the state, and all of that stuff happens. It's the only way to do it. It's the only way it can happen. And the recycling state is what picks up those cells before the pre-cancerous, before they get to a cancerous. And then it's supposed to happen that way.
Yeah, because
we never get in that state.
Hey, you're pretty good. I can recycle you and use you. All right, I can clean up the cell and I can see whatever's diseased, dying, or damaged tissue. I can say, I'm going to take you apart because you're old and outdated, and I can just take the parts and I could discard what's no longer of use, and I could use the other parts. It's a master efficient system.
Unbelievably, cancer grows and builds its fortress from our junkyards.
Right.
Think of your house. If you stop taking out the garbage and recycling, how long would it be till you got stuff everywhere, right? Yeah. That's what the cancer uses, raw materials to build its fortress. It uses our own junk because we're not getting rid of it.
And so it's kind of protective, it's like, hey, I got to help clean your house because you're not doing it. And in some ways, it's like I'm accumulating this, but I don't know how to get it out of the body. I just know how to store it.
It doesn't happen everywhere. It encapsulates. It doesn't happen in both lungs. It'll start in one lung. It doesn't happen right in the middle. It happens in the furthest lobe. Cancer does form, but it's the body's dealing with it in a very intelligent way. Right. So you don't die in one day. And if you don't, it gives you time to correct it.
That's why, yeah, that's why Andreas Moritz's book, Cancer is a Survival Mechanism. And what I said in my experience with the cancer, it was an opportunity for me to wake up and live a more conscious life, because I was living ignorant and arrogantly. So I had to be more conscious of my ignorance and conscious of my arrogance, and then apply that.
I was diagnosed with cancer twice, and I
Yeah.
always felt fortunate because I could see it. It was on my skin,
Yeah.
right? I never got a biopsy. I never confirmed. So I don't know. Maybe it wasn't, I don't know. But I was by a dermatologist, family practitioner. It was pretty sure by the exam. And so I did what I did in my world, and eventually it got ugly, grew, and it fell off. The body pushed it out. I've had clients who have passed tumors in their colon, right?
Yeah.
They come completely out. They get another scan, and that section is clean. There was a divot, but there was no cancer. There was no scar tissue. It was very interesting. We've had people cough them up because the body can now work on it and get rid of it. And
Yeah, any kind of fatty cysts or any benign cancer tumors or anything, the body's saying, oh, we're ready to now do some real cleaning. We've done the preparatory phase. Now we can clean it up. This is amazing. And so that's brilliant work. I want to come to a conclusion here and just actually start to sum this up, and then again, remind people where they can come and get you. And I want to be able to have more time with you in another session about some more solid suggestions,
absolutely,
and advice, and really go a little bit deeper and wider in some of these topics, because I think a lot of people, these concepts for some people is going to be mind blowing, and they might have to repeat this listening to this. So we have an assessment, measure your waistline. Well, first, let's back up. We know that insulin is the central hormone to govern so many of these chronic degenerative diseases, and it's how it's being utilized and how it's being disrespected in many ways. Or people just don't know. They're living ignorant and they just don't know. And so they need to be educated on it, is the number one step. And then secondly, we have the waistline measurement, under 38 for men, under 35 for women. That's being kind, probably. And then especially, that's probably good for the winter, if you need that extra weight for the winter. Okay. So, and then we've got a blood test, vitamin D test, and your triglycerides are definitely there matching or helping to determine roughly where you are in terms of insulin resistance, and the HDL. Because if the HDL is high and triglycerides are somewhat high, that's still a good sign. But under 100, I've heard under 70 for triglycerides is optimal.
If
HDL,
you just use blood sugar, if your blood sugar technically is over 87,
yeah,
your risks go up.
Yeah,
if it's 100 or higher, you're pre-diabetic.
Yeah, mine linger in the mid to low 90s. My fasting blood sugar, so I could definitely work on it. But the HA1C as well, they want that below 5. I think there's a couple of markers that we could work with, but vitamin D is really important. The triglycerides, HDL, and then we have. If you have weight fluctuations, so if you're losing weight 20 pounds and then you gain 20, 25, and then you lose it and you gain it and you lose it, you're actually damaging your system. You're doing more damage than you think. So it's kind of that same thing of all alcohol today and none tomorrow. And it's kind of the same bing bang ping pong thing that you're really damaging yourself. So be mindful of that. And lastly, one of the best plans you can actually implement is just eat 3 meals a day. Don't really make it that hard because that's going to be hard enough for most people.
Yeah, just do that. And then when you feel better, you'll be motivated to do more.
Right.
So take it step by step. There's no rush on this because it didn't get here in a day. Start with the 3 meals a day and stick to it. And
don't think going 2 meals a day is going to be better necessarily, because you might need calorie. You need to keep the metabolic fire going.
It's more genetic. You want to activate that system, and you want to I call it you want to turn on and off, the on-off genes. Turn them on and off, the start, stop, start genes. Start, stop, start. The start, stop, starting is what will get the system to be primed. Overdoing it numbs it out, underdoing it stresses it out. So people like to do intermittent fasting, what they call that these days. I'm an old school guy. I don't agree with that title, but that's what they do. They're skipping breakfast, and maybe they eat 2 meals a day or 1 meal a day. If you do that every day, your body will adapt and go backwards eventually. You see, I
Yeah.
saw it all. That's why I have insulin friendly living. It was built off of the failure of first paleo, then keto, and then what's now called that. Now it's insulin friendly because it encompasses more.
Yeah, because you can't be afraid of insulin. It's a part of our lives.
Oh,
It's
absolutely not.
it's necessary for our growth and repair phase.
Just like stress.
But
Stress is why stress keeps us alive, is why we are able to live. You can't eliminate it. You can be better for it.
Yeah, that's true. And they say don't help anyone that doesn't have an arm reaching up. If they don't have anything to reach for, there's no stress in their life. And so awesome, Dawn. And so what we can do is send people over to insulinfriendlyliving.com. Is there another website? I think you had
We have the
Fasting
Facebook
Secrets.
group, Insulin Friendly Fasting Secrets.
Yes.
It's open to anybody. They can also find me, Don Clum, on my personal profile. I post on both because one's public and one is you can share stuff like that. But any which way, and you can just, if you want to message me, just message me on Facebook Messenger.
Yeah, gang, I want you to know that Don is just so interactive with his client base and his websites and his Facebook. He is I think the most responsive. I really do. I don't see too many people that are in the position where you're at to be a virtual office and have a virtual program, that some of them are just traveling and enjoying life, but your enjoyment is coming through and helping people really change. And so that's another form of expressing your compassion. So we thank you for being alive and doing this work. I thank you. And I definitely want to have more conversations with you about how I can align with you more deeply. And
Me too. I can't wait. Anytime. I love this. I'm with you.
Blessings to you. I'm just going to hit the record button, stop it, and then we'll have a chat.